Hello, everybody. I'm Randy Horton, Chief Solutions Officer at Orthogonal. Thanks for joining us today and logging on for this webinar. We know you have busy schedules, so we're going to really try and make the most out of your time as we discuss the topic of leveraging automation to deliver high-quality MedTech software. Many of you know we do these webinars about once a month here at Orthogonal and trying to bring in industry experts who have great insights from medical device manufacturers or other services firms or product firms supporting them. And we're really looking to bring together and summarize great best practices going on in the industry so you can all learn more about them, ask us questions, and then go back to your day jobs and try and adopt them. Two very quick things before we started. First, we really value your feedback on these webinars. So if we reach out to you by phone or email or a survey or something, and you could tell us what you thought of this webinar, what you'd like to see in future ones, we would really appreciate it. It's how we make them better each time, or try to make them better each time. Second, and very briefly, I didn't used to say this because I thought it was obvious, but apparently it wasn't. If you hear anything you like on this webinar, feel free to contact us and Orthogonal can help you develop your software. Very briefly, Orthogonal is a firm that is involved in improving patient outcomes faster. The way we do it is by helping medical device manufacturers accelerate the development of software as a medical device, connected device systems, and digital therapeutics. And the way we do it is by taking the best of software engineering and product management tools and techniques, not from MedTech, not really from healthcare, from the tech industry, and fuse them in a really effective way with MedTech's focus on safety and effectiveness in a way that lets us not just build medical devices faster, smarter, iterate them, have them grow and learn more quickly, but also to fundamentally raise the bar on safety and effectiveness higher than we've ever done before. I will also say one of our guests here is from Amazon. You are welcome to contact Ian. I also heard they have a pretty good website if you'd like to buy stuff. So you can't buy from us online, but I think you can from Amazon online. So with that said, I'm going to quickly say our goal here today is to really give you, I'd like to pack about 3 to 3.5 hours of content into just one content as we look at the key questions we discussed, which were how universal principles of quality, including software quality, can apply to MedTech software. What are actionable strategies for automating testing, deployment, and monitoring? What are some real-world examples of things like DevOps, infrastructure code, and chaos engineering as applied to medical device software? And how can automation support regulatory compliance and improve reliability? We want this to be a dynamic webinar. We've already incorporated the questions that many of you submitted ahead of time into our discussion here, but please put questions in the chat and we will try to answer them either in real time or with chatting on the side. If your question is really, really narrow and focused, we're happy to answer it, but we might choose to defer and take it outside the session. With that, I'm going to ask each of our panelists to introduce themselves. 2 are here. A third is currently many time zones away, and he may be having connectivity problems, so we will see. Let's start with Ian.
Absolutely. Yep. So my name's Ian Sutcliffe. I work for AWS. I've worked for them for about 6.5 years now. I'm based out of Switzerland at the moment. Anglo-American, but based in Switzerland. Prior to AWS, I worked in med device companies. I've worked in biotech, biopharma, even health insurance. So a long career primarily in life science industry. However, prior to that, I think I learned about quality management through osmosis. So my dad was big in whole total quality management piece, contributed to BS 5750, which was the predecessor to ISO 9001. Even to this day, I have some heated discussions with him around what good looks like for a modern IT quality management system. So quality seems to have been a theme throughout my kind of working life, although I did kind of immediately notice this disconnect in the industry where the focus was on compliance more than quality. So I'm sure we'll get into that.
We'll definitely get into that. Larkin.
Yeah, Larkin Lowry. I am the CTO of Orthogonal. I'm actually also a former client of Orthogonal. I've spent the bulk of my career in IoT space, largely outside of the medical device space. Got into the med device in 2019, so about 6 years ago. And as part of that engagement, I ended up hiring Orthogonal to help me do a turnaround of a digital health organization. And what I discovered is that, a lot of my experience from the IoT space translated very well to the connected medical device space, all very relevant. And, especially when we talk about clouds and the automation, which is part of the topic of discussion today, it really comes down to how you're able to scale your organization to support hundreds of thousands or millions of devices concurrently interacting with your product and services with great reliability, right? Not just reliability in terms of the quality of service delivered, but also the user experience and profitability for the organization. All of those lessons I learned from outside of MedTech apply very well on the inside.
Sorry, it took a second to find my microphone there. Welcome, Larkin. Third person who may be joining us is Bernhard Kappa, our founder and CEO, who I'll do his introduction for him in case he comes. He spent a career working on modern software, starting at Microsoft, working on, I think, some of the original pivot table functionality in Excel, for those who've used it. And about 15 years ago, really saw the potential of connected devices and modern software methods to really move the needle on healthcare outcomes, and has been focused fully on that space for the last 15 years. So with that, just quick schedule note, we're going to go till about 50 minutes after the hour. That's 5-0 with kind of the core topic we've promised. However, if there's more questions, we are happy to stay on for a while longer, and regularly do stick around for a while longer. If you stay to the end, I can also promise you we have a tradition that we started this year in honor of generative AI. Every time we do a webinar, I go to this website for generative AI and create a really, really horrible theme song for this specific webinar topic. I don't mean for them to be bad. It's just really entertaining how bad they are. Some have been country music or 30s big band sound. This one happens to be 80s synthesizers pop for those who are interested. And so we'll save that for the end, probably just so we don't force people off right now in case they don't want to hear it. But it's bad, trust me. Okay, so key discussion today. And I'll make one note here first, which is we'll be talking mostly in reference to AWS and Amazon services because Ian's here, and that's what he's familiar with. But the general principles we're talking about here pretty much exist as concepts for all of the major cloud services providers. They may have different names for them or different approaches to them, but this is not an Amazon specific discussion. I think this is truly a cloud general discussion with Amazon as the case study. So all of that, let me start with a couple background questions, because we talked about one of the interesting topics is, let's talk about the roots of quality in MedTech and where MedTech learned to do quality. And then let's talk a little bit after that about the roots of quality in software and why and how those have differed. So I would ask you all, what does quality look like when the thing that quality is around is you're basically you're working with physical things, biology, chemistry, physics, and in our case, the human body, specifically for biology, and the malleability of those things. How do you implement quality controls in that kind of world?
I can take a stab. I mean, from my past discussions, I mean, you look at the history of quality management. I mean, I think that it kind of all harks back to, manufacturing, the way the Japanese took it and ran with it and improved it. It's all about physical products and the way that you kind of establish a level of quality that is suitable for your end customers. As part of your quality management system, then ensure that you keep producing at that level of quality. That consistency is through consistency of process. So you have SOPs, work instructions. The whole idea is that you do the same thing the same way to the same level every single time. So consistency throughout that manufacturing process. So that kind of works when you're producing the same product every time. So that's, looking at the physical side, that's my view on quality and how quality management systems work.
So would you say that actually, if you look at quality at an automobile manufacturer or a well-run airplane manufacturer, that takes quality seriously, that it's in many ways not so different from what you see in MedTech? It's more a matter of degrees and shades of color as opposed to being completely opposite or
No,
unrecognizable to each other?
it's the same. I mean, from a physical device perspective, there's a lot of similarity. I mean, there's the main difference I would say in the medtech world is, the FDA and other agencies, they're a bit like an overbearing parent. They want us to strive for quality. They want us to prove it as well. So there's a little more focus on producing that evidence that we are attaining our quality objectives. But really, the fundamentals are all pretty much the same, I would say, in that physical medtech world. And then it changes when you get to software.
So
Right.
Larkin, maybe take your, and any spin you have on what Ian said about the physical world, and then dive into the software world from your point of view.
Right. So I guess I'll kick things off with a sign that my high school computer lab had in the building, which was to err is human, to really foul things up requires a computer. And part of the reason why I say this is that, in the physical world, there are certain physical engineering disciplines that involve very, very fast reactions, explosions, for example. Can evolve in a very, very short period of time, times that are really hard for humans to conceptualize. But in software, literally our universe is changing, dozens of times depending on the size of your equipment and what you're doing, maybe even hundreds of times per nanosecond, right? So the ability for things to get out of control and to change its behavior very, very rapidly is really beyond the ability for humans to conceptualize. Something like a physical object is unlikely to go from sitting on your desk to be sitting on the moon within a millisecond, right? There are certain limits to physics which keep things within a relatively narrow operating flight envelope, right? So I don't want to dismiss the complexity of physical manufacturing and testing and quality for those devices, but what we really have to do with software is understand that this is a system that has many, many more degrees of freedom than any hardware system could possibly imagine and have to deal with. And we have to take a fundamentally different approach because we cannot treat each degree of freedom completely deterministically. We can't just assume that we can model and understand exactly how everything is happening at all times. We have to take a slightly different approach, but the underlying philosophy is the same. The objective is the same, but the scale of the problem just requires slightly different thinking.
So would it be accurate for the two of you if I said that the challenge of quality in the physical world is constraints on how hard it is to physically change things, and the constraint on quality in the software world is it's too easy to do anything?
Yeah, I mean, you think about it, so a lot of those manufacturing lines, it's consistency of product. It's once you've designed and created this product and got your manufacturing in place, it's consistency. Um, in the software world, every product we create is different. So every system we create is for a different purpose. So in effect, every product we're creating is different. And that variability of product kind of messes with the more traditional QA and quality management approach to things, because that idea of SOP and work instructions locking down how you do things to be in consistent processes doesn't work as well in an agile environment where you need that variability. The process needs to change.
So the Toyota method for, car manufacturing. I'll assume most people know it, Edward Deming, total quality control, yada, yada, yada. If not, you can quickly, ask your favorite robot about that. What's different between that and how we ensure quality with digital?
Well, there's two challenges here, and this is an area where being relatively new in the medtech space, even I am still somewhat conflicted, is that we treat a lot of our activities in software as manufacturing. We are designing software for us, manufacturing is operating it in a, say, a cloud environment, or the software running on somebody's smartphone or whatnot. And a lot of times software engineering teams really get more focused on the design side of things, and they think about it as manufacturing. I am producing software, I am manufacturing software, but really, and truly in terms of our terminology of design controls, you're really just designing ultimately, right? We have to think about, for us, manufacturing is operating this software. And there, a lot of the same principles that we have with physical manufacturing apply. We want the software to run the same way for everybody all the time. We want performance to be consistent. We want the performance of the algorithms and whatnot to be consistent. We want predictability in the behavior of the system as deployed. Those are all of the things that manufacturers care about on the assembly line. We care about it in product operation time, and we have to think separately about the design phase. And there, I think Ian hit it exactly right on, is that we need to think about during design phase, we're only designing things we've never designed before. If we've designed it before, we should be taking advantage of automation. We should be reusing, et cetera, so forth. So I think for software, we have this maybe not very particularly clear across the industry mindset about the difference between the design phase and like the operation phase of the software.
Okay. So great. We're experienced medical device people. We know how to use good quality techniques for physical things. We're smart, we're adaptive, we adapt to new technologies, new coatings, new motors, whatever. Why is it worth a webinar on how we adapt to software for quality and automation?
Other than it's a really interesting topic. I mean, there's these interesting dynamics. Yeah, I think it was in one of our blog posts around, hardware people are from Mars, software people are from Venus. Just the different way that we think about things, that more dynamic nature of software. And I think there's a lot of pressure for the software engineers to follow the hardware engineers in the way that they work. They're perceived as having more greater experience in the world of med device and dealing with all the regulations. But I think there's opportunity for companies to learn from the software industry or any industry that's got high performing software engineering teams. It took a long time for companies to move away from waterfall as a methodology and adopt agile. It took FDA to issue guidance saying, you know what, we actually prefer agile. You should probably adopt that in the regulated world. So I think there's an opportunity, and then through webinars like this, where we can start to highlight some of these software engineering best practices and how they can be then incorporated into the med device space.
So maybe elucidate us, please, on some of the practices we're talking about. If you could just give everybody, assume they're not super familiar with the cloud concepts like DevOps, infrastructure as code, CI/CD, things that are all heavily automation oriented. What are they? And what distinguishes them from how we used to run servers and data centers?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the software development lifecycle, so, you start with requirements, gathering those requirements, eliciting requirements from your end users. Traditionally, that was all then captured in Word documents. You would then create, get approval on those requirements. Are these actually the requirements? Then you'd hand them over to a dev team who then had to kind of basically reinterpret them and figure out what you truly wanted, come up with the system design. And it was a very linear approach, and it was very document centric. In today's world, even that, first part of your SDLC around requirements management, you are using tools like, the Atlassian Stack, Jira, Confluence to capture requirements in electronic form. You can then start to leverage that as your data. So I think one of the big changes is moving away from this document centricity. There was this perception in the industry that you've got to document everything. I mean, the FDA kind of says if it's not documented, it didn't happen. But you have to look at what do they mean by that? What is documentation? The fact that we're capturing these records in a system, it's documented. We've satisfied that need. It doesn't have to be an actual document per se. IT organizations have done an awesome job enabling the business to move from paper-based processes to GXP records, for example, in the pharma world. That's why 21 CFR Part 11 exists. We now have electronic records. What they've done a really bad job on is applying that to themselves. Let's look at our own processes. How can we automate our own processes? How can we shift from paper to electronic records? That's just the front end of this whole process. And then we'll kind of get into DevOps and everything.
Right, but there's a deeper question though, which is, right, there's the concept of automating your documentation, but then I think there's an aspect of the software perspective, which is not just to automate your documentation and what you normally do, but change your thinking, right? Change your different, right? Not just simply trying to replicate the processes that the documentation evolved to go with, but to actually change how you think about problem solving and creating essentially a new type of document that you're now generating as a source of evidence, right? But I think that's really the opportunity for kind of culture exchange between software and hardware, frankly. So, there's the opportunity to take some of the concepts that we have in software, which are largely that what you're doing is fast to experiment. You can build something, throw it away very, very easily and quickly. You can test ideas. You can verify that the ideas are valid. And you can do that experimentation very quickly. That benefits hardware development for sure. But on the flip side, the constraints of the hardware world, especially like embedded software, for example, is they live in a world of like zero tolerance for failure, right? You have essentially one shot to get your product out there and working correctly, and it's usually very expensive if you have to replace hardware because you have a defect. It's usually also very expensive to do firmware updates. Now, that's certainly a lot better than it was 10 to 20 years ago, but still, whenever you're applying a firmware update, there is risk of that update going wrong, right? And potentially damaging or bricking the device or otherwise resulting in something that's less ideal. This is a concept that, or a set of constraints and pains that the software side of the world would definitely benefit from, right? It's very easy for a developer to say, oh, I see that bug, I'm going to go fix it now. It's like, well, the hardware people would have detected that problem first and not even allowed it to ship, right? Yet the software attitude is more about, oh, let's fix problems dynamically and in real time. And for an industry such as this, that's not particularly compatible, right? So I would really like to see, the cross-pollination from both sides. I think both sides can benefit a lot from each other.
And I think we're seeing that a lot more in the cloud world as well. I mean, you mentioned that quick prototyping. I mean, that's ideal for cloud situations. You don't have to provision physical hardware anymore to do your prototypes. You can use a cloud service. It's on demand. It's pay as you go. You stand up your environment, you tinker around, you rip it down, and you stop paying. So that's ideal for prototyping, pilot programs. But also on the hardware side, hardware manufacturers can start to benefit from the power of cloud as well through simulation. So we've worked with customers where they are shaving an entire year off their hardware development cycle by first simulating the hardware in software. So you can model your device, you can then simulate that device, you can start to have those interactions with the device, and it's completely virtual before you start to spend money on actually building the physical device itself. So yeah, there's definitely this cross-pollination going on. I think, both sides can benefit from the experience of the other.
So let's get into some examples of how we make this work. So Ian, one thing you've talked a lot about is that the way we document IT processes that make our medical devices work can be very different. In the old days, if you had a CPAP machine that literally you had a modem inside it and was connected to the phone line in the house and dialed up to a bank of modems at the manufacturer, with the squeaky noises and everything. Can you talk about how you would have done backup procedures then on that data center and on that, that storage area network or whatever, as opposed to what are the options that are different and how it impacts quality on, in a modern cloud world?
Yeah, I mean, back in the day, you would have, a team of DBAs that were operating your backend databases. They would have their own set of SOPs and work instructions around, here's the procedure we will follow to do the backup of your data according to this schedule. And it was still very manual in nature. In the modern cloud way of doing things, you can define your backup schedules. You can use things like tagging of databases. So if you tag it in a certain way, it will fall into this particular backup schedule. And it's completely automated. So the backups will be taken. If there's ever a problem, you will be alerted. That alert could be just notifying a database administrator of a problem, or it could try and self-heal. So that alert itself could trigger automation to go and see if it can determine what the problem was. And if it can, it will auto-heal itself. So I think there's a lot more flexibility now around, taking what were very, very mundane tasks and completely automating it. You can also start to leverage, more of these managed services in cloud. So it used to be a case where the DBA team would operate this fleet of servers. They were responsible for not only stacking and racking it, but patching the operating system, patching the database management system software itself, and then operating the whole thing. You can start to shift to more managed services when they kind of move up the stack. So a simple managed database like RDS, we take over the operation of the underlying servers and the patching of those servers. You still, as a customer, will determine when your database engine is to be patched. So you define your maintenance window, but the patching itself is completely automated. So again, you don't have to worry about patching your database management system. Take it a step further to something like Aurora. You don't even know that there's servers behind this thing. You're simply responsible for defining your tables and getting data in and out of it. It's completely managed. So there's, the cloud is really taking a lot of that operational heavy lifting off the shoulders of these admins.
So Larkin, that sounds like a prescription for a lot of cowboy people going in and being like, oh, something's wrong with this backup script and just changing it on the fly. But we don't have an SOP. How is this medical device grade? Help me out here.
Right. So like anything else, it's not the tool, it's the user that we have to worry about, right? And so you have to have the appropriate, procedures in place and the right culture in place to use this. But the real key to this, right? So, all right, for all the cloud providers, you can have a DevOps person or an engineer or anybody at all go into the web console, click a bunch of buttons, and impact your infrastructure, right? For a healthy organization, whether it's MedTech or not, that is actually not so great if you're in production, right? And having that level of direct manual control. What we really want to be doing, and the best practice, is to use automation tooling. So if we're doing native AWS, we would use CloudFormation. We might use Terraform for other platforms, where we're defining infrastructure as code, basically the tools of building, operating, and maintaining our infrastructure through essentially code that can be audited. It can be code reviewed. We have change management controls on it, et cetera, right? So it's about taking the practices that we use within software to make sure that our software development process is controlled, and we apply that to how we operate the cloud, right? So yes, the cowboys, they can get in there and create a gigantic mess, but you shouldn't have any cowboys in your organization. Like, that you should be rejecting that kind of an attitude. But what I do want to maybe put a twist on with the cowboy mentality is that what we are able to do with this methodology is go from a point where, like 20 years ago, my lifestyle was basically, I need 5 more servers. I need to start negotiating with Sun on a good deal. And then I'm going to have to go and sell my soul to Oracle to put a database on it. This is a 9-month to a year-long project to expand my data center footprint, right? Today, that's probably 5 minutes or less, right? To build the Terraform or the CloudFormation scripts to go and do this. So it's really about taking the power of the technology, making it very accessible, right? So a DevOps team, an engineering team, whoever it is, they can build out an experimental infrastructure to test an idea. They can do it in an afternoon. They can get their results in the afternoon. They're done. They've spent maybe $40, right, in infrastructure costs to do this experiment. Whereas before, earlier in my career, it would have been, a 9-month project and it cost $500,000, right? So, when there's an aspect of the cowboy mentality where I'm thinking they're testing and exploring boundaries, right? We want our people to be able to test and explore boundaries, but following a methodology that is not going to result in chaos.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the most common conversations I have with customers. I mean, so my job is to try and help these highly regulated customers moving to cloud. And that balance of freedom against control is one of those interesting dynamics. And so, I try and help IT organizations address that through various mechanisms. So you mentioned perfectly, infrastructure as code. That is one way to be able to demonstrate perfectly you have control because you put it in your source code repo, it's versioned, it's peer reviewed, and then it's deployed through a CI/CD pipeline and deployed. And then you have post-deployment checks that can monitor these things. So perfectly controlled, no humans in that loop, very consistent. But that other flip side is, yes, you want to experiment. So, I work with platform teams where you have categories of accounts almost. So you have sandbox accounts that you can spin up very quickly. That gives you complete freedom to go test the latest and greatest services, see how they can impact and improve your business, or what benefit are these to the patients that are using my device. So that gives you complete freedom. Then you have a different class of account where you want to kind of lock it down a little more. So you approve which services are allowed to be used in these accounts, and this is probably your dev accounts. And you group these and you can create kind of organizational units, and you can apply different policies to each of these different accounts. So you can then, through those mechanisms, again, demonstrate you have control over your environment, but you're starting to provide that kind of freedom to your developers while also maintaining the appropriate levels of control. Another idea is the use of building blocks. So let's say you have a particular database, it's going to be storing PHI data. You want to have that controlled and locked down. You want it encrypted. You can have a reviewed and approved infrastructure as code, Terraform template that's gone through the rigor of the review and create that as a template. Now your dev teams can go, if you need that kind of approved database for your particular application and its intended use this template. It's the kind of qualify once, use many approach. So again, another mechanism for, creating that level of control, but also allowing developers that self-service so they can kind of consume that approved template through a service catalog and then start to bolt these Lego bricks together.
Right.
So the next question will be about what does that look like that's different from SOPs and documentation for an audit or going back and looking. But first, we have a quick acknowledgement of our sponsor. It's very relevant to this topic. It's the book, Harry Potter and the Curse of the Magic Software Tool. Coming to your bookstore, probably never. But maybe there's some fan fiction based on this concept. But yes, it is the people, not the tool. Consistently. Okay, so let's talk about this. So if you previously had in your data center, you had an SOP for backups and how backups were done. And it was highly detailed about exactly how you configured your backup servers and when they worked and what's now in your SOP. And what does your SOP point to? And when an auditor shows up that says, how do you know it did what you're saying it did? How do you show them? Let's go through those things. What does it look like now?
So I work a lot on trying to figure out what does good look like for a modern IT quality management system. And then this is a conversation I have with people in the whole quality industry. I mean, in my, should we say, slightly extreme view is there is no SOP about backups. Instead, if you're using the tooling, using your automation, it's in the system documentation, it's in the run books, it's in the automation itself. So you used to have an SOP, right, that describes exactly how you will do your backups. You would then have a requirement to do read and understand training. So how many people opened that SOP, left it there, closed it, marked it as read? I'm done. Because it had no day-to-day value. When you think about, now you've automated this whole backups, you have training material. It's like you hire a new DBA guy, he's going to go through training material that explains exactly how the system works. It will go through the system documentation. You will then also have potentially run books, either manual or automated run books that explain what to do in case of a problem. Let's say the backup fails. So you have all of this actual information that is used by the team on a day-to-day basis. So the SOP no longer provides any value other than, it's just going to duplicate that information. So I always say that as soon as you've automated a process or a part of a process, that system documentation and training documentation supplants and replaces the SOP because there is no value. Now, what you can do is then say, okay, we know that another thing around there is the controls. So quality has said for data integrity purposes and operational integrity, you must take backups. So that's the control. You could have a control framework. That control, you used to say, okay, refer to SOP. Now you go, refer to this automation or to this system. This is how we do it. So the SOP is gone, but you still have that way of providing evidence because you have the control objective, but you're just linking it to a different set of evidence that you have achieved that control objective.
So there is still some way to get a pointer from the original requirement for the medical device of what backup looks like and needs to do. Not what it looks like, but
Yes,
what it needs to accomplish. And somewhere else showing, yes, we've accomplished it in
yes,
design, and then somewhere else that shows, yes, we are accomplishing the backups and we can prove it.
exactly, exactly. And then this is still in alignment with ISO 9001 or 13465 or 85, because when ISO 9001 changed, I think it was from 2008 version, then used 2015, they kind of got rid of the whole document hierarchy and then simply said you should have appropriate level of documentation. And they never said that what form that documentation needs to be as well. Now, people hang on to the old document-centric way and SOPs, but we have now different repository of information, documentation, training, and now we have the data as well. So the records that actually show, yes, all these backups are passing and happening properly. We have the records to back it up as well.
And does that fly with notified bodies, internal auditors, external auditors, regulators doing inspections? I mean, how established is this as an approach that you're going to be on safe ground?
I would defer to my customers to reply to that one directly, but I haven't had complaints from the customers I've dealt with.
And you have customers who have implemented this approach.
Yep.
Oh, excellent. So let me ask you guys something. I'll start with Larkin. It sounds like Ian was almost implying that if you have an SOP and you comply with it, that might not actually translate to great quality.
Well, it might not, right? So ultimately, what you need to have is the ability to verify that you are achieving your quality goals. So this is an area where I think automation enables something that really has not been possible before. So so let's just talk about backups, right? So what good is taking a backup if you can't restore it, or if you don't know how to restore it, or if the data is not valid when you restore it, right? So, back in the old days when people had shelves of tape drives, and we would shuffle tapes around, it would be such a monumentally expensive effort and time-consuming effort that you would very rarely be able to verify your backups and actually do a mock restore or disaster recovery scenario. But with the cloud backups, you can demonstrate that not only that your backups ran according to your backup plan and schedule and whatnot, but you can also very quickly and easily and relatively cheaply verify that the disaster recovery restore scenario is also valid. So here you're able to provide the evidence that you did the thing, but nobody is saying do the backups just so that we can have backups. We're saying we want to be able to recover in a disaster scenario or a catastrophic data loss scenario or whatever it is, right? that is really what we want. We want the recoverability. We don't care about how you achieve it. We want you to do it through backups because that's sensible. But ultimately, we want to demonstrate recoverability. And there, the automation is what makes that possible. And this is also very true, or like an effect of test automation in general, right? Is the automation enables the testing to be so cheap that you can do more testing. So it actually ends up giving you greater confidence in the quality of your product or service because you're able to demonstrate much more of how that system behaves under different conditions because it's cheap and easy, relatively speaking.
Yeah, and extending that not just to database, but your entire environment. So we talked about how you now have versions of your infrastructure as code. You can now spin up entire environments as per a particular version or date. So let's say you have a problem reported about your device. You have a kappa that you need to address, and the version of the device is X. So you can go back and go, okay, that was this environment. Let's spin it up. Let's investigate what might be happening in the actual environment as it looked back in that day on that date.
Right, and that is incredibly important when we're, inevitably at some point somebody needs to do a data migration activity, right? That's not something that you're going to do only one time and hope that it goes well. You're going to practice it over and over and over again until you've convinced yourself that it can't possibly go wrong. And so what do you need to be able to do? You need to have a set of initial conditions, pre-migration, conduct your migration, verify the migration results, reset everything back to the initial conditions again and rerun it, right, to ensure that you have confidence in the process. The ability to do this with infrastructure automation is really what makes this even feasible to even be talking about, right? And this also gets back to, inevitably we're going to be testing forward and backward compatibility of our microservices and APIs and whatnot. We have a new service we're deploying. Maybe it's adding a new field or column in our database, and we need to make sure that as we are doing rolling updates throughout the system, that everybody can play nice with the new database structure. How are you going to test that repeatably without this level of automation within the cloud, right? It's so often companies rely on long-lived test environments or QA environments that are maintained, right? And you're trying to maintain those environments in a particular configuration. You're running your tests on it, and well, the tests may pass, but are they passing because they should pass, or are they passing because there's some residue left over from some other activity that somebody forgot about or didn't document? And really, when you get to production now, it's going to fail. So being able to reset your conditions to the, your set initial conditions before running your test suite just gives you more confidence in what you're going to do. And that this, the automation of the infrastructure really makes that possible.
You're saying that basically you can do the equivalent of like a lab scientist dream, which is to actually just press a button and it sterilizes everything and puts it back to the original condition so that your next run is exactly the same as the previous one, or the original one, I should say.
Right, exactly. And so, a very good practice that is probably a bit more common outside of the med device space is that when a software engineer is submitting a pull request, right, they've completed their code, they're handing it off for inspection, code review, and acceptance, that the CI/CD pipeline is able to deploy a dedicated environment to demonstrate that particular developer's code change. You're able to test it in a production-like environment. It's an ephemeral environment. It will only last for the period of the pull request. Maybe it's hours, maybe it's a day or two. But you're able to not just test the code by inspection. You're not just testing it by the unit tests and the integration tests that you're running, but you're able to do credible integration tests by actually having it in an actually deployed environment. And the economy of this is so good that you will literally do this on every PR request code change that developers do. That gives the developers much, much higher confidence that their code is going to work as expected, and gives all of the reviewers a much better view of the completeness of the implementation. And again, this is just completely infeasible without the types of infrastructure automation we've been talking about.
And it's all self-documenting, can be, so you can go back.
Yeah, I mean, all of that activity, it's being logged.
Mhm.
So you are generating the evidence to prove that, yes, this code change has had, as far as we can tell, no impact or will have little impact. So you're generating the evidence and it's automatic.
So let's talk about a couple of anti-patterns that you all named, or worst practices that you all named, that are easy pitfalls, and then we can maybe loop around and talk about a couple of positive best practices here. One that I thought was really interesting that you guys came up with: fear-driven compliance versus profit-motivated quality. Go.
Sounds like a locking one, that does.
It does. That does sound like me, right? So, and I think this comes from my perspective coming into MedTech only relatively recently, like 6 years ago or so. Uh, so the quality is largely enforced by a quality organization that is there to enforce rules, right? It is more about stop than go. And it is there to protect the company from liability. Now, arguably someone will say, oh, well, we're trying to make sure that we can get a clearance. But ultimately, at the end of the day, you're trying to protect the company and the shareholder from the liability of having an event in the field. Let's just call it that, right? That could be deleterious. So certainly, if you have a recall, if you have a patient injury, for sure, yes, they're also concerned about patient harm, but ultimately they're there to protect the company and say stop. But what we really want to be focusing on, instead of making sure that quality is telling us how to say go, it's telling us how to go into the field with a product that is going to be safe and effective, and it's going to be profitable, and it is going to produce the experience that is beneficial for the patients and for the users, for the company itself, right? It's more of a focus on go than stop.
Lift and shift, heads in the sand. Essentially going to the cloud, but you wouldn't know it in how you're behaving.
Yeah, I mean, I work with a lot of med device pharma companies, and it's a spectrum, but I broadly put them into one of three buckets typically when they're looking at cloud. One is head in the sand. So they try and avoid regulation at all costs, which basically means any net new workload that they're building in the cloud is unregulated. And the big downside is that usually the core or most value workloads are the ones that are regulated. That's usually the core of your business. So, there's a lot of, and then there's downsides of, having to retrospectively qualify environments and whatnot if you eventually go for regulated workloads. So that's a bit of a no-no. The second, let's say most common, is the business as usual. So you take your current quality management system, your SOPs, work instructions for your IT operations, and you simply apply them to the cloud. So I've seen cases where you would open a ticket to get an EC2 instance provisioned, because that's how you used to do it. Instead of using infrastructure as code and self-service, you open a ticket to get a server. So you're not really gaining any benefit from cloud, from that dynamic nature. You're just simply, transplanting your old on-prem mentality and ways of working to the cloud. What I try and get customers to truly do is look at cloud native ways of working. Try and become a regulated cloud native. Try and adopt and build in these more cloud native ways of working into your regulated IT operations, become more agile, use more automation, use the proper tooling to automate your SDLC. You will start to get the benefit of the cloud technology, and then really, try and optimize how much benefit you're getting from cloud. Don't worry the fact that your workload is regulated in some fashion, because again, if you strive for quality, if you adopt a culture of quality over compliance, my view is compliance will be a natural byproduct.
Excellent. We've got some great questions here. I'm going to take a couple of them out of order. My apologies to people submitted them. In pharmaceuticals, we conducted stability analysis over longer periods and under different conditions to monitor how compounds and products changed over time. With software and software platform/infrastructure, change is more likely to be rapid and constant, as discussed. Are there post-deploy checks available for customers to monitor production operations, and how long does this service typically run?
Yeah, so certainly, monitoring the system that once you're in production is essential. You're going to monitor all aspects of it. You're going to develop an understanding of the patterns of usage of the system, what usage levels are normal, what usage levels are abnormal, and you're certainly going to monitor that for I would say like acute episodes, right? Something failing, an unusual level of demand, some sort of an event that causes the behavior or the performance of the system to become suboptimal. So your DevOps team, your SREs are going to be focused on monitoring, alerting, and responding to those particular events. But with regard to what was said about the longer term view of in the pharmaceutical space, this is also very relevant for software. So even though the software may be fixed for a particular release, you are going to be accumulating data inevitably. And the accumulation of data, if not properly managed, can result in the system becoming slower and slower and slower over time. And so you may have a degradation of performance of the overall system that occurs over a year, 2 years, 3 years, right, depending on the amount of data that you're pulling in. So without proper data management, data architectures, you could have some effect that has some long period degradation within software.
And I think some cloud services are try and address that anyway through, we've had this idea of auto scaling servers for a while. So as load increases, it will dynamically scale up the number of servers you need or scale down. And we have the same concept now kind of within the database space. So you have database services that as you throw more data into it, they will grow automatically. So they will rescale, and so that you shouldn't then start to hit these points where performance is degraded. So it's, again, benefits of cloud technology with the elasticity and I'll say almost unlimited availability is starting to provide benefits even in these use cases.
Right. But I might just tie back to the idea of lift and shift, right? So part of being able to take effective advantage of the auto scaling and other sort of scale management aspects of the infrastructure is you have to develop with that cloud native mentality. You have to use the tool as it is intended to be used. So if you come with your on-prem experience and you try to apply it to these tools, you may not get the advantage or the value of that auto scaling, right? You have to think about, how is this tool meant to be used? Not how do I want to use it? How do I intend to use it? But how was the tool, why was the tool built in the first place? Why was it designed? Why is it a successful tool? How should I use this tool in order to get maximum value? That's an important shift in attitude.
So the interesting follow-on question to this also answers a key metric question for this webinar, the metric being MTAIQ, mean time to AI question. So it was 49 minutes is the mean time to AI question on this webinar. And the question was, take all of what you just said, how is AI going to change that, or is it going to impact that?
Good question.
Yeah, so well, I'll let Ian jump in first. He'll have smarter things to say.
Yeah, I mean, so I've seen a lot of chatter right now around the application of AI to validation and quality. Yeah, I mean, and the fact that we're, through this webinar, encouraging a lot more automation, which is leveraging a lot more data, which means we have a lot more that we can start to use in the AI world and ML world. I mean, I'll take it back to, so think about this, you have a system let's put it in the physical world. We have a bioreactor that life science customers want to optimize the yield that comes out of this bioreactor. The more drug it can produce, the greater the profits and whatever. If they skunk that batch of drug, that's a big expense. So they're taking data from this thing, they're feeding it to the cloud, running it through an ML model, which is providing feedback on how to adjust the dials and knobs to optimize yield. Now we're getting a lot more data out of your IT and SDLC processes, feeding it to our model. We could start to optimize that, the process itself. We can also apply AI ML to, as I think Larkin was about to say, was like that monitoring situation. What's happening, especially in complex environments where it's probably difficult for a human to get his head around all the moving parts, and AI could probably help with that. Yeah, there's probably numerous examples. It's an area of great interest right now. So that's probably why you're measuring this mean time to AI question, because it has to come up. In my world right now, it's the answer's AI. What was the question?
Right. One of my
Magic software tool.
Yeah.
Magic is right. Yeah, but one of my first experiences, getting into the medical device space, I encountered a group of people who felt that me proposing sort of automatic monitoring or like using analytics tools to monitor user behavior was cold and impersonal, and they wanted the patient to call customer service and talk to a live person, right? And that level of service is what the company wanted to have as their kind of brand and identity. And I reacted very non-positively to that, because I wanted to be able to monitor what was happening with the usage of the product and anticipate those calls and prevent the calls, right? I want to be watching to see, are we seeing any unusual behavior that indicates that there might be a bug or a defect in a design, or just another operating mode of an algorithm that we did not model out. I want to be able to look at that by monitoring the behavior of the system, all of the monitoring metrics that we're collecting. AIs are fantastic at identifying correlations. They're also good at identifying spurious correlations, but nevertheless, they're really good at doing this. They're able to pick out patterns that humans aren't going to notice. They're able to process far more data than humans can. The tools available for this are just phenomenal. They're really, really good. And that allows us to get out in front of problems before they become real problems.
Yeah, and that's being applied in numerous ways. I mean, in manufacturing, predictive maintenance of equipment is very popular. Even in med device space now. So we're working with customers that have like thousands, millions of devices, and they would have to send field engineers out to a hospital to perform maintenance. Now, because these are now connected devices using IoT, they're getting telemetry from these devices, feeding that through AI models, looking again for that predictive maintenance. Is there an indicator there that we should go and service this medical device, this scanner, this whatever, prior to it actually hitting a failure?
Right. Something from my early history on this line is from fleet management, right? So this was IoT
Yep.
monitoring vehicles. We were able to identify early failure of a particular Chrysler transmission that was in vans. And in fact, we were able to isolate it down to the particular manufacturing run, and could provide that back to the manufacturer and say, look, you clearly had a problem, because we could see through the data we were collecting from the vehicle's computer that there was a problem with that particular manufacturing run. So, the data that you're able to collect, the tools, the AI tools that are available allow you to do a lot of what you're talking about, Ian, in terms of like reducing your overall servicing costs, keeping equipment operational and efficient and profitable. But you're also able to quickly identify defects in either your design or your manufacturing process and get ahead of those things. So it's those are aspects of AI for doing data analysis. I think there's also some clear use cases for the AI being able to help us produce a lot of our infrastructure as code. allowing our developers to produce that configuration definitions faster. I mean, I think as we're saying, AI is touching everything and is proving itself to be
Yeah.
useful.
I mean, there's capabilities now where Gen AI will produce your CloudFormation specification based off just text. You feed it some requirements, feed it use case, and it will provide you not only infrastructure as code, but infrastructure as code designed according to our well-architected framework. So it's good infrastructure as code.
Right.
We have one last question we'll take, and I want to thank everybody for joining us. And then we'll play a really bad jingle song. So the last question. I like the ideas of using automation scripts as documentation as opposed to a separate SOP. How does this work with auditors, reviewers who are not software engineers? Is there a high-level SOP that bridges the gap with a summary?
So I would pose a question back. Why is a non-technical person having to review infrastructure as code or an architecture specification? So I always have this conversation where, there'll be a quality person that'll be a gate in your process, and they have to review the design specification that they don't understand. So I am all for reviews, but the right person should be doing those reviews. So with infrastructure as code, it's just like code reviews. So the person doing that review maybe is a fellow engineer, a senior engineer. So when you do that pull request of your infrastructure as code before deployment, the person reviewing it knows what they're reviewing. They are hopefully a more senior engineer who's an expert in the infrastructure and cloud infrastructure. So I would push back a little bit who's reviewing. It needs to be the right person, but if it is the right person, CloudFormation templates or Terraform templates, they're quite actually readable. If you look at the YAML code, they're actually quite self-explanatory if you know what you're looking at.
Very good. If you find that answer unsatisfactory or
Controversial.
you're controversial, give us a call. Thank you very much for that one. I want to thank all of you for joining us. I'm going to try to play this now. Let me see if I can.
Oh boy.
You offer refunds if we don't like it.
No, well, sort of. Hang on, wait a second. All right, now I got to share and play through with sound. I've mastered the art of doing this. Except where is the window? Let's try this one more time. Share. Music. Okay. You hear it okay?
Yeah.
Or better for worse?
Ian says it starts with the code you write. Larkin builds the systems that shine so bright. Bernard's got the pipeline flowing just right. And Randy's on deck to automate the fight. Leveraging automation, we take the lead. DevOps power for the speed we need. Infrastructure as code sets the pace. High quality MedTech in every space.
And I'll stop there. We can post the rest of this online if anybody wants to hear the second verse, the chorus again, the bridge, and then the chorus again, and then the close. So,
Well done.
That's good.
Ian, thank you very much for joining us. As always, it's been terrific.
Welcome. My pleasure.
And thanks to all of you for listening today. Please reach out if you have questions. We're always happy and here to help.